Welcome back in, Geico Outkick Studios. Obviously, the biggest story by far across the entire sports landscape. What happened to Dak Prescott yesterday in the game against the Giants? We just opened up the show talking about it. We've been talking about it throughout the entire show, and we'll be talking about it throughout the entire show, off and on. We bring in now for a special Monday morning analysis a guy we usually talk to every Thursday. He's Dr. David Chao at Pro Football Doc on Twitter. You can go read his analysis of all the different injuries at profootballdoc.com and also at outkick.com. All right, so Dr. Chao, first thing, I'm going to dive in almost completely into this Dak Prescott story. I appreciate you getting up early with us to break this all down. So first of all, in your experience as at the time the San Diego Chargers, obviously they're in L.A. now, how many times did you have to run out onto the field and treat an injury this severe?
Well, it probably happened, unfortunately, every other year.
Yeah.
Not saying this exact ankle injury, whether it was a hip dislocation like Tua or an ankle fracture dislocation like this or an elbow dislocation, something that is quite honestly grotesque for most people, right? And
yes.
So roughly something like that.
All right, so tell me, and again, if people out there are a little bit squeamish in their stomach, but we're talking to the doctor, exactly. So my understanding, based on what I've read from you so far, is that the injury to Dak not only is a fracture, but it's a fracture that breaks through the skin. In other words, I mean, I know it's kind of a gruesome sight and injury. That is a much more significant fracture than one that does not break through the skin typically, right? Kind of walk me through medically what that would be called and how you would assess it.
Well, the team has said compound fracture, and that technically is an old term. Compound fracture now is termed open fracture. That means there's a puncture or tear in the skin because of the severity of the break and or dislocation. And it's an inside-out tearing of the skin. Something tears far enough. The ankle not only was broken, the fracture, but it was dislocated. It was dislocated far enough that the sharp edge of the bone or the skin just tore. And that's what makes it an open, quote, or compound fracture, which is why he had to go to the hospital today.
Immediately.
Last night, and immediately, and have surgery to wash it out and clean it up. Sometimes they just clean it up if it looks like a dirty wound and come back for a second surgery to fix it. Sometimes they're able to fix it immediately. But the emergency, believe it or not, is not the fracture. It's the open nature of it. And if you look at the video, and if you haven't seen it, if you go to profootballdoc.com, we did an in-game video breaking it down, and there's an article up at Outkick breaking it down. But the videos look, if you're squeamish at all, don't go to the video. You can go to the video at the free website, sign up, log in for free, no credit card, and listen to it. Listen to the analysis. But literally what happens, this is a severe form of high ankle sprain. So severe, the bone breaks and the ankle dislocates, right? And if you watch the video, look, the kneecap is pointed north, and his toes on his foot are pointed east, right? And Dak looks at it, and what does he do? He literally slams his right ankle against the turf to straighten it.
Yeah.
And it actually straightens. But then it falls right back out again because it's so unstable, meaning that's how badly it's broken in the whole deal. And like I said, once again, if it's graphic video, if you're weak in the stomach at all, don't watch it. But yeah, I mean, incredible.
Sorry to cut you off, but for people out there who remember seeing this video, Tony Finau, I believe the golfer, dislocated his ankle and then popped it right back in. Do you remember that? I was at the Masters. I'm not sure exactly where it was. You probably have seen that video before. Dub may remember, because he's a big golf fan, where exactly that happened. But he was able to pop it almost immediately back in, and he played in the tournament. Now, he had severe bruising and everything else, and we may have even talked about this with you. Do you remember that golf event when that happened with –
I do remember that.
The 2018 Masters, and Dub says he finished in the top 10 at that tournament. So sometimes you can dislocate your ankle and be able to pop it back in.
I wouldn't say that was quite the exact same thing. That was more of a quote fender bender dislocation.
Yeah.
This was more of a
Right.
the car is total dislocation. I mean, it's totally different levels of stuff. There's no way Dak could have walked on his ankle, much less finish golfing. So yes,
but his initial thought though, Dak, was that I can basically fix this, right? Like, you know, and obviously when he tried to straighten it up, it didn't work. And that, for people who saw the video, it was graphic. All right, so I always like to ask this question. There's probably kids listening to us right now, Dr. Chao, and they may have recognized, hey, I'm not going to be a pro athlete. But there are a lot of people who love sports so much that they're interested maybe in doing what you did, working with a team or being an orthopedic surgeon, working with athletes who injure themselves. How do you prepare yourself mentally as a doctor? You mentioned that maybe every other year you would have to run out onto the field, and it's something like that as opposed to a sprained ankle or, you know, a sprained shoulder or something where it's not particularly graphic to look at. That has to be a super challenge, particularly as you mentioned, I've read about this before, you know, the infection aspects of an open wound on a field. There's a danger there that doesn't exist, and I'll get to Alex Smith in a moment, but there are David Palmer, I believe, was the Alabama wide receiver who had, I think it was Palmer, but I may be wrong about exactly who it was. Dub, you may be able to look that up, who was the Alabama receiver who, and I think Palmer's the wrong one. That was another Alabama receiver, but he had a broken foot, and he then had an infection from something that he got on the field, and it basically ended his career. Maybe it was Tyrone Prothro, I think it was. Look that up, Dub, and see if I'm right about it. It wasn't Palmer. I think it was Prothro. But there are, you know, guys whose careers basically can come to a, you know, conclusion over the way that treatment occurs after an injury like that.
Yeah, no, infection is really what did it to Alex Smith. Infection is the first and foremost danger before you get to the bone part of it all. And there's no question that's the first concern on the minds of the doctors taking care of Dak Prescott right now. It wasn't the break that sidelines Alex Smith's career and led to all the muscle and nerve damage and the permanent damage that we saw, even though he had a heroic comeback today. It was the effects of the infection that did all that. So that's his first hurdle for Dak. And if he does come back from that, he's got a good chance to be fine. I have permission to talk about this, so it's not violating HIPAA, but Darren Sproles, in his second year of a 14-year career or something like that, I might be underselling him in how many years he played in San Diego, had a fractured dislocation of the ankle. I can't say it was exactly the same as Dak's, but it was similar, and obviously he went on to a great career. But as far as your answer about how you get used to this, I don't know that you're ever used to this, but imagine this in terms of football. If you start playing peewee football or even at high school and you don't like getting hit and you're sore after the game and you're avoiding hits or you don't know how to take a hit, you probably don't get to the college level and you don't come close to the pros. If you want to get into media or radio world, or like you are, and you're shy to speak in public or think on your feet, you probably don't make it to the next level. These guys make it to the next level because they go through the trenches, and that's the same for medical school. If you don't like the sight of blood, maybe you go into radiology or psychiatry, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you don't like some of this stuff or you don't have the stomach for it, there's a natural selection process that happens. You don't just one day, graduate medical school, never seen this, and then get thrown into this and then say, I don't feel good about it. There's a whole process to getting where you are in life, and that's true in any profession.
We're talking Dr. David Chao. Okay, take me into the prognosis going forward for Dak Prescott from here, from a medical perspective. If you were advising him and or the Cowboys, what kind of prognosis would you be giving as we come into Monday morning now and start thinking about the future? I'm sure he's going to have one of the foremost surgeons, I would imagine, the best medical treatment you can possibly imagine for anybody. But I assume also that Alex Smith did. So sometimes things just don't go well through no fault of the doctor, he or she themselves. What's the process now?
Well, the process now is to deal with the infection, make sure it's washed out very well. If there's any worry about the infection not being completely clean, you should pack and dress the wound and wash it out again tomorrow or the next day. Don't worry about fixation of the fracture and stabilizing the ankle. He should not need an external fixator, assuming that the infection or potential infection can get taken care of with wash-out and antibiotics. His prognosis is very good. Now, his prognosis for 2020 is terrible. He's not returning this year, period, end of story. I don't care if the Cowboys make it to the Super Bowl, and I don't care if that Super Bowl is delayed until March because of COVID. He is not going to play this year. But he has an excellent chance, assuming the infection issue is dealt with or prevented, to start week 1 of 2021, and an excellent chance of still having an NFL career where he can still be quite mobile and be Dak Prescott. So although everyone's going to point to he didn't sign the big long-term deal, and this is why potentially you want to do it, I think in the end he's going to be fine contractually, because I expect him to still make a very good 2021 comeback.
And he would be ready for, so let's pretend that the surgery goes well and everything else. Is this something where he's ready for mini camps in May? What kind of full prognosis, how long of a recovery is this process?
Typically a 6 to 9 month range. And so will he be ready to do something in minicamp in May? I believe he will. Will he be ready to do everything in May? He probably won't. But he can project well enough that come March, I think, is when he's going to need to figure out the whole franchise tag or new contract issue. And I think he'll have a good chance for the Cowboys to be able to project where he'll be. And I think it's going to look good for 2021.
And that's obviously incredibly key. We saw the injury to Tua, which was pretty severe, the broken hip. And if I remember correctly, that happened in November. And then by March, if I remember correctly, or April, he was doing his own pro days. He was running around well. This is a little bit different scenario. Obviously, the draft isn't happening. But as a guy who only has a 1-year contract, that means that they have to make decisions maybe sooner rather than later. So you expect him to be back in time for either the Cowboys to re-franchise tag him, long-term sign him, or for Dak to be able to go out and test the free agent market?
Well, I think he's enough of a talent, and he'll be far enough along that he can be projected as such. And there's no question his athleticism is a big part of what he does. But in the end, it's not like he's a cornerback, right? And, we talked about Darren Sproles doing it. I think Dak can do it too. So I'd be optimistic for him and his family that he's still going to get his. The path is going to be a little bit different, and it's a horrific injury, and 2020 is a wash. But, the silver lining is the career, I think, is still fine.
Last question for you, and we're talking to Dr. David Chao at Pro Football Doc on Twitter. Appreciate him joining us on Monday morning to break down the Dak Prescott injury. You mentioned Alex Smith playing yesterday. Family was in the crowd cheering. Everybody was I think moved in some form or fashion by his recovery from the injury that he had. What exactly happened to Alex Smith, and how much of a triumph is it for him to get back on the field based on how many things went awry for him since the injury? That was also described as a compound fracture in his game a couple of years ago.
Well, the issue there was that the infection stayed, and they weren't able to clean it up initially. And if anything, with the early surgery, the infection was spread. And then it ended up, muscle and nerve died. Everyone has seen video of the celebration of him making the team in his own driveway there, but he's hobbling around with the foot drop. Now, he's got the AFO. He did a great job. He made it back on the NFL field. He's a San Diego kid. Look, give him the Comeback of the Year award, Player of the Year award right now, right here, right now. But like we wrote at Outkick, earlier this fall and summer, he's not the same mobile Alex Smith. He's still very mobile. He's more mobile than my friend Phillip Rivers, but he's not Alex Smith. The regular Alex Smith doesn't get sacked 6 times in this game for 41 yards. He eludes the majority, if not all of those pressures. The old Alex Smith is not throwing the ball for 2.2 yards a pass attempt, and that's what happened. I think he had to stay in the game because Kyle Allen wasn't 100%. Ron Rivera wasn't trying to do it to him. I mean, congratulations to Alex and his family. Notch it up. He did it. He made it back to the NFL. Let's all just celebrate that.
Thank you, Dr. David Chao. Appreciate you getting up early for us, and we'll continue to talk to you, I imagine, on Thursday and see what the absolute latest is for that injury situation.